And joining me now is Representative Jim Himes, Democrat of Connecticut. He is the newly elected chairman of the New Democrat Coalition. Congressman Himes says that his coalition is the linchpin for anything that will get done in the House of Representatives' upcoming session. Let's find out why. By the way, Congressman Himes also sits on the House Intelligence Committee. He joins me from the Rotunda in Washington, D.C. What is the New Democratic Coalition?
Hi, Larry. We are almost 60 Democrats that have come together over a period of years. We tend to be focused on kind of the economy of the future, how we can create more jobs, how we can foster innovation. A lot of us have business backgrounds, for example, and so we're New Democrats in the sense that we're interested in where new industries are going to grow and what we can help with that, but we're Democrats in the sense that we care an awful lot that the benefit from growth and from new jobs actually is fairly shared through the population. And to your political question, Larry, we tend to come from purple districts, right? The language we use is a little different than people who come from dark blue districts. We tend to come from places where there are lots of Republicans and lots of Democrats, and as a result, politically speaking, when and if the Democrats ever recapture the majority in the House of Representatives, it will be with 20 or 30 people who look a lot like us, who know how to talk to Republicans, who know how to talk to independents. And so we have a role to play within the party saying, hey guys, we do pretty well in heavily Democratic districts, but if we ever want the majority, we need to be able to play in those districts that have a lot of independents and Republicans as well.
Congressman, that sounds like the Bill Clinton philosophy, is it?
Well, I'm not sure I would associate us with a set of policy goals, but, Bill Clinton certainly had, and other Democrats have had the idea that we ought to compete everywhere in the country. We shouldn't write off, you talk about Bill Clinton, we shouldn't write off Arkansas. We ought to figure out what the people of Arkansas really care about, and we ought to, come up with policies that address their issues. If we don't look at Arkansas, if we don't look at Missouri, if we don't look at Michigan and Wisconsin, guess what? We're going to end up where we were in November, where we did really, really well on both coasts, but the middle of the country is a big red swath.
What clout will you have in the House since you are the minority?
Well, there's really two things. One, we are some 60 members. That's not insignificant. Of course, on the House, where we're in the minority, in contrast to the Senate, we have a lot less sort of procedural heft. But here's the thing. Here's the interesting thing. For the 6 years that the Democrats have been in the minority, the dance that is done to pass a law is always perfectly predictable. The Speaker of the House, either John Boehner or Paul Ryan, eventually loses 20, 30, 40 Republicans, usually the Freedom Caucus guys. The Tea Party guys say, sorry, this is not extreme enough for us, and they go away. So now John Boehner, or today's Speaker Paul Ryan, doesn't have the 218 votes he needs to pass something. So he comes looking for Democrats, and this is where the Democrats need to be smart. The American people want us to govern. They want us to come together and act in bipartisan fashion, but that gives us the ability to say, in that instance, okay, we'll talk to you, but here are 2 or 3 things that are consistent with our values as Democrats that we need you to do. And that's where you've got a kind of interesting negotiation.
And how does your group deal with the progressive Democrats who are left of you?
Well, it's not so much that we deal with them. I mean, look, we're cousins. We're brothers and sisters. We agree on just about everything. There may be some areas of disagreement, but we just tend to have slightly different perspectives on things. And so, and again, the reason I say that, Larry, is because oftentimes they try to create an opposition, an antagonism. We have slightly different perspectives, but if the Democrats are ever going to be a truly national party appealing from coast to coast, and most importantly, what is in between those coasts, it's going to be because we say we're going to add people. We're going to welcome you in, even if your point of view is a little different. Maybe you come from a coal state, and we're going to accommodate your points of view, as we do, for example, with Senator Manchin. If that's not our ethic, if we say it's our way or the highway, that if you don't think exactly as I do in Connecticut or exactly as my friend does in California, you're not welcome, we'll be a pretty small party.
All right. How does your group assess Ryan? Can you work with him? What do you make of him as Speaker?
It remains to be seen, right? He hasn't been Speaker for a long time. Personally, I look at Paul Ryan and I see a young guy who is a legislator at heart. He spent his entire career on Capitol Hill, and I think he respects the institution, and I think he has a core understanding of the idea that if you're going to get anything done around here, you get things done because you are willing to compromise to some extent. Now, Paul Ryan is a pretty hardcore right-wing guy. He's a very, very conservative guy. So I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but I do look at the guy, unlike some of his colleagues in the Republican conference, and say he strikes me as the kind of guy with whom you can negotiate. I don't think Paul Ryan, who's a young guy, wants to go down in history the way John Boehner did, which is a guy who barely controlled his own caucus and after a couple of years got tossed out. I'm pretty sure Paul Ryan has higher aspirations than that involve actually getting some big things done.
On the day President Obama was elected, Mitch McConnell historically said, "We're going to stop him at every turn." Does your group feel the same about Trump?
No, absolutely not. And it's funny that you say that, because I've spent the last 8 years telling my constituents that I try not to be overly partisan, but when the Republicans or Mitch McConnell come out on day 3 of the Obama administration and say, we're going to stop this guy at every turn, as you said, that really locks the place up. And so we're not going to do that. We're going to rise above that. We're going to be better than that. Now, what we hope is 2 things. One, that Trump is true to his word on things like infrastructure. We got to rebuild this country. And if he dedicates himself to that, he's going to have a lot of Democratic help in doing that. We'll have our arguments, of course, over how you do that, but that'll be terrific. So we hope that he's true to that. Number 2 is, all this other stuff, all of the language of the campaign, the anti-immigrant language, the dog whistles, the exclusionary language, the Muslim registries. There is a point where if that comes to the forefront, if that is front and center, it's going to be pretty hard for us to say, oh, okay, it doesn't matter that you want a Muslim registry and want to trim back the rights of women. We'll still work with you on infrastructure. We sort of hope that stuff recedes into the background so that we've got the space to work with this new president.
How do you assess his role as president-elect so far?
Well, like pretty much everybody here in Washington, I'm scratching my head and trying to figure out what this guy is doing. And by the way, that's not a partisan statement. I think my Republicans are as puzzled and as concerned, maybe over different things, as the Democrats are. Look, I guess my main area, I sit on the Intelligence Committee, so I spend a lot of time thinking about national security and foreign policy, and I understand how interconnected and how complicated things like China are, things like our relationship with the Philippines. And I must say, I do get concerned when I sort of have the sense that the president-elect is reformulating American foreign policy at 2 in the morning on his Twitter account without much advice from the State Department. That worries me.
Other than the infrastructure, is there anything else you're hopeful about vis-a-vis Trump?
Well, he said something that I think really angered a lot of my Republican friends around here. He said, look, we're going to preserve Medicare and Social Security. And that, of course, is a tough conversation, because what exactly does he mean by that? But that is a statement that you don't usually hear from Republicans, who tend to go in the direction of let's privatize, let's block grant things. So, if he is really serious about preserving those programs, because that in and of itself is an important objective, if he's serious about that, and if he's willing to do a deal whereby we extend the viability of those programs into the long term in a way that doesn't hurt our least advantaged seniors, our least advantaged populations, well, he's going to have Democrats on the other side of the negotiating table.
George Bush decided never to criticize Trump, never to criticize Obama in 8 years, never to publicly speak against the president. What would you advise Obama vis-a-vis Trump?
I'm told, that they had a pretty fruitful and interesting meeting in the Oval Office that went well over an hour, and my suspicion is that may have been the moment where Donald Trump got the first sense of how truly awesome, and I don't mean that word in the way my 14-year-old daughter uses it, I mean that in the biblical sense, how truly awesome this office is. And I like the precedent of the President of the United States not having to worry about the guys who preceded him, kibitzing or criticizing him in public. But hopefully these guys do have a quiet communication so that the next president, Donald Trump, can get the benefit of a guy who, even if Donald Trump disagrees with him on everything, at least had 8 years of experience that perhaps can add something to the administration of a guy who's never held elected office. So again, I don't like the idea of ex-presidents criticizing current presidents, but I really like the idea of ongoing communication.
As always, Jim, great talking with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Larry.